With both the front and rear of our SCT410SL complete and all coming together with perfection, it's now time to start mounting both sections to the main chassis so that the vehicle really starts to take shape. So on it is with Kit Bag J. So time to install everything to the main chassis. 4mm thick machined aluminum for lighter weight yet high strength. Pre-holed with cavities built in for mounting various parts and electronics further down for a lower center of gravity, providing higher stability when racing around corners. As for Kit Bag J, it's pretty standard stuff. The center drive shafts with their typical Tekno high quality and strength, as well as all the required brace parts. Time to get everything in place. We'll begin with the front end assembly and loosening the two screws that secure the A block into position, just enough so that the block still holds the arms in place, but to provide enough clearance since the A block will key into the main chassis. Lower the front assembly onto the chassis and secure into place from the bottom with two 10mm flathead screws. And we can now tighten up the two screws we loosened on the A block, keying it into the chassis and keeping everything securely in place. With that in place, we'll move to the center of the chassis and install a small side guard using a single 10mm flathead screw from the bottom, as well as the center chassis brace in this orientation using 10mm flathead screws, again from the bottom, just so that they're nice and snug. You don't want to be stripping any threads in the plastic here. Onto our metal motor mount next, a really nice piece with motor mounting holes and etched numbers that indicate which 32 pitch pinion is to be used with the corresponding holes, in essence creating the perfect pinion and spur gear mesh for you. Nevertheless, this is positioned next to the small guard we just installed and secured from the bottom using three 10mm flathead screws, going into metal here so some thread lock is required. Now we move to our center diff mount, which is positioned next to the motor mount just installed and held in place with another two 10mm flathead screws from the bottom. Finally, we can get the center differential built in the very first kit bag into place. Insert a bearing into either side, and then insert a diff mount over both, before dropping into position onto the center diff mount just installed onto the chassis. As we drop down, we need to insert the center drive shaft. Although I found the center brace gets in the way, it's much easier to remove two screws and move the brace to one side slightly in order to insert the drive shaft securely in place. With that, cover the center differential with the included plate and secure each corner into place with four 8mm button head screws. The rear two can go straight in so that they're nice and snug, while the front two are threading into the metal motor mount, so some thread lock is needed. Front and center now done, and we're ready to bolt on our rear assembly. Starting with the small chassis brace previously installed to the rear assembly, insert a pill, hole at the top being stock position, into either side. Now feed through a 20mm button head screw, then through the top of the long rear chassis brace, and securing with a flanged lock nut. We want everything securely in place, but try not to tighten down too much just yet. Instead, we'll get this installed onto the chassis and then tighten up once in place. Remember to feed through the short center drive shaft, one end into the center differential and the other into the rear, before flipping the buggy over and installing six 10mm flathead screws. 4 of these go into the rear assembly itself, securing the bulkhead directly to the chassis, while the remaining 2 secure the chassis braces we left loosely connected to the bulkhead, providing some give to secure them now into place, before flipping back over and tightening up the chassis brace screw into the lock nut the rest of the way. And with that, other than the motor screws, which we need to keep safe for motor installation later, Kit Bag J is now complete and the buggy is really taking shape. Front and rear bolted on, with the center differential in place, and everything should turn nice and freely. So double check the steering to make sure it's super free, and ensure there's no binding down the entire chassis whatsoever. Typical Tekno high quality here, all parts have come together with perfection, not a millimeter out, providing a really enjoyable and satisfying build. With that said, it's time to build and mount our shocks into their new positions with the next 2 kit bags.